Welcome, Alexandra, to our Tips Therapist Tested, and I'm very happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here as well.
I'm going to be even more happy when you let me know when somebody cannot stop working even though they're exhausted. I mean, it has happened to me, probably has happened to you. What do we do then?
Definitely, I can resonate with that. Definitely. I have been struggling quite some years with my perfectionism when it comes to working, studying, even in social interactions, I may say. Like this constant thinking that I have to do more, I have to push more, get harsher and harsher physically, but also mentally to myself. So, this is why I thought that maybe today would make sense to give you some therapy tested tips I'm using this period.
Fantastic. Looking forward.
All right. So before going to the tips, I think it makes sense to say what I do as like a preparation before the tips. So the first thing I do is to actually sit down a little bit and think about what is happening. For example, what is my emotion right now? I'm feeling stress, I'm feeling pushed. What is my body telling me? I'm usually feeling tightness on my chest. I feel a lot of tension on my muscles. So, this is the body reaction. I'm also noticing what kind of behaviors I'm doing. I'm usually overworking, overcompensating, trying to perfectionate everything. And last but not least, I'm checking what is it that I'm thinking. Usually, I'm thinking things like, oh, I should have done this better. This is not good enough. I should try once again. What about another try?
Yeah.
So this is how I start. And then I go into the tips that I'm using.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so number one, what I do, the first tip that I would give you is behavior focused. So I'm trying to notice this behavior of overworking, of overtrying. Has it helped in the past? I'm checking my previous experiences. Usually it helps for short-term period. Like
Mm.
you feel a relief that I did it so good, so well, I'm happy with it. But when you start accumulating more and more and more tiredness, then in the end you feel burnt out.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to that, I check with myself, do I want to do this again? Does it make sense? Does it
Mm.
worth it? So when I'm done with my behavior, then I'm checking another tip I'm using. This tip has to do more with my thoughts around what is happening. So as I mentioned before, usually I'm thinking that it's going to be catastrophic if I don't finish this deadline now, or if it's not a perfect assignment or a perfect work. So I'm taking a step back and I'm thinking, what is the worst thing that can happen if I don't submit on
Mm.
this deadline? Or if it's not a great thing, what I will submit? This helps me to do a reality check. I realize that it's not the worst thing in the world if this happens. And it also helps me to figure out problem solving solutions. So if that will happen and it's not a great assignment, for example, how can I resubmit or how can I use the feedback that I will be getting? So it doesn't seem that catastrophic in the
Yeah.
end for me. And last but not least is maybe the most important tip I'm using and I would totally recommend is to check with my emotions. How I do that is I usually imagine that I'm carrying my child version of me inside of me. And I'm trying to imagine how is that child feeling when I'm talking to it again and again like that, saying that it's not good enough, that it has to try harder. Then I realized that okay, makes sense why this child is feeling so anxious and so pressured. And instead of pushing it more, I'm trying to meet the needs that it doesn't have. In this case, for example, the kid doesn't feel like there are realistic expectations or that it can also have fun. So
Mm.
instead of pushing it, I'm saying, okay, let's go for a walk. Or let's try to not make it perfect. Let's try to make it enough. And that's enough.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I like in the first tip when you said about the difference between the short-term and the long-term relief. Yes, indeed, when we're working more, we get this short-term satisfaction that we completed, we achieved, we accomplished something. But in the long term, the fatigue will accumulate. In the long term, our friends, our relationships will be unhappy because we're working all the time. We will be unhappy because the only thing we're doing is only work, work, work. So bringing the long-term consequences is a real game changer.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think when we're in the moment, we have the dopamine of it, we're excited. Doing all those things makes us think that we are good enough, so we fall in the trap. But in the end, if you think about it long term, it's not working.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I like that you had, a tip for the behavior, a tip for the thoughts, and a tip for the feelings. That's a very holistic approach. Thank you so much.
Of
Well, if
course.
you liked what Alexandra shared here with us and you would like to work with her, you can find her at antiloneliness.com and you will find the link in the description. Last question for you, Alexandra. What are the people that you like working with? What are you helping them with? And what is the approach or the approaches that you're using?
Sure. So I'm working basically with cognitive behavioral and schema therapy, but I'm further specialized at gender, sexuality, and relationship diversity affirmative therapy. What that means is that I work a lot with clients that identify as queer,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm working along the lines of any psychological challenges they may face. But that doesn't exclude people that don't identify as queer. I work a lot with people that have struggles with their anxiety, with their perfectionism, burnout. I work quite a lot with assertiveness and boundaries, and last but not least, with trauma and grief.
Wow. Thank you so much. Well, these were some fantastic tips, and I hope they will be useful for our listeners or audience. And thank you very much for being here, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Vassia, as well.